Hello, everyone. My name is Olaf Groth, and I'm a professional faculty member at the Haas School of Business of UC Berkeley, teaching courses on the intersections of strategy, innovation, economics, and futures, as well as public policy. As such, I'm very much looking forward to sharing some thoughts on the current crisis, as many of my colleagues at Haas have done as well, and especially on the aspect of staying resilient and exercising foresight on what might lie beyond. And really, in order to be resilient, we have to exercise that foresight. We have to know what lies beyond, right? Because if we want to lead people, if we want to have a positive influence on those around us in our communities, in our companies, in our organizations, in our families, we have to, of course, acknowledge that this is a very painful time. Many people losing jobs, many people losing their health. All of that is bad. And of course, we cannot dwell on that, but have to give people hope as well. Hope that there is a better beyond, whatever that may be. And that's a tough thing to do because there are a lot of things that we have lost. And so it's even more important that in order to be resilient, we develop a vision of what is to be gained. And to that end, I have put together some steps for you that I hope you will find useful. It's called FLP IT, FLP IT. It's an acronym that I developed only so that you can recall the steps more easily, nothing more to it. The FLP IT acronym consists of 5 different parts. The first one is forces, the F. We have to assess the dominant forces that are developing during this crisis. What are the forces that will shape the texture of the future to come? Next, we have to go to the L, the logic. As we collide these forces, a new operating logic for the future emerges. What does that mean? Sounds rather technocratic. What that means is that as forces collide, they change the rules, they change the energy, they change the dynamics in an environment, in an economy, in a region, in a society. So we have to understand those new sets of rules. So that's logic, the operating logic. Out of the operating logic emerge phenomena and themes. That's the P in FLP IT. Phenomena insofar as when things collide and new dynamics develop, we will see new things arise, new phenomena, new characteristics, as it were, of the future that lies beyond the fog. We have to assess those. After that, we have to go to the I in FLP IT, the impact. What's the impact of that? Because that's really the so what, isn't it? It's good to know about the operating logic and the phenomena, but at the end of the day, you want to know the so what. What's in this for all of us in terms of, both success and the potential for failure, of course. We have to be honest. So after assessing the impact, we have to go to what I call triage, the T in FLP IT. Triage because we have to understand what types of opportunities we can no longer or should no longer pursue. What types of opportunities that we had are still there but need to be fixed. And then what are some of the opportunities that might be arising anew as we look at the future? And that's usually where we fall short because we were so busy battening the hatches and tightening everything around the ship that we forget to see the new horizons that lie beyond, and that we need to carry an open mind with us as we step into the future. So with that, let me go to the first step, and that is assessing forces. There are many, many forces, and I'm just going to bounce a few off of you, right? So, of course, there are the medical, scientific uncertainties. What's the mortality rate of the virus? How long is it going to take for infections to double? Those are critical metrics for this particular force of the mortality rate. Then time to a vaccine being found, and not just found, but produced and distributed. That's a critical uncertainty right there in the medical domain. Then there are some social uncertainties and forces like the degree of solidarity in communities, the capacity of societal institutions to cope with the community's needs and to help us care for each other. And of course, the degree of cooperation and collaboration between different countries. That's really important because viruses don't really know borders. And yet, closing off these borders is also, as experts tell us, not really a very successful way of maintaining or of uh, bounding the impact of the virus. And then there are economic forces and uncertainties, such as the impact of lockdowns on the economy or the effectiveness of the various stimulus and recovery funds. Uh, Truth be told, the money that is being spent, these are huge amounts, and we're making best educated guesses as to how they're going to have an effect. But we just don't know for sure because while we have lived through crises before, the amount of money spent and the geographic area that is impacted by the virus are both unprecedented, at least over the past couple of decades. And then there are some innovation centric forces and uncertainties, such as the rate of innovation by startups. We need startup entrepreneurs to help us adjust to new eras, to ring in new eras, to help us adapt and stay flexible, to upgrade ourselves and evolve. And if these entrepreneurs are hurt, not just in the normal way that entrepreneurs, of course, fail and they have a social contract that rewards them very nicely if they succeed, but the risk of failure is very high. We are not talking about taking away the risk. We're talking about a large systemic failure to fund these entrepreneurs and to bring about new disruptive ideas that can help us adjust to the crisis and what lies beyond. And then there is the adoption rate of new virtual and hybrid virtual physical types of applications and technologies. We're all on video conference calls these days, so we understand that we are stepping into the digital world more and more as we can't be with each other physically. But that's clearly not where this is going to end. We have to figure out how to use these new types of virtual and digital services to lead better hybrid lives. Of course, we're not going to stop being physical, but we also are becoming more digital. So what's our comfort zone there, and what kinds of solutions can entrepreneurs and innovators at large offer for us to step into this new era? So that's just a few uncertainties, trends, and forces that are at play. And of course, one has to take a very holistic perspective because we have to look at society broadly. We call this steeple or pestle: social, technological, environmental, ecological, or economic, I should say, political, legal, and ethical forces. And so I just gave you but a small selection of all the forces at play at the moment. There are ways to prioritize those that are more impactful. For the moment, I have chosen two for you, and that is the adaptive capacity of societal institutions as they coordinate with each other, as well as the impact of stimulus and recovery funds on the economy. When you collide just those two and then you layer in some of the others, there are some very different futures that could be emerging from the fog, right? Let's start with one that's called a medieval mess. This is where we do not distribute funds in such a way and to the right pain points that the economy at large would benefit, but rather just those that have always been empowered and wealthy. That is clearly not good for the fabric of society. That could make certain people, institutions, and companies or organizations even more powerful. Pair that with the fact that there is no major global coordination and collaboration on the part of institutions, and we might in fact drift back into some kind of medieval world where different municipalities and different power points across the globe are all trading and dealing and negotiating with each other, but really not finding one global paradigm to live by. That's contrasted by a world that I have called frugal feudalism. And this is a world in which there are essentially a lot of people who are low to medium income, but not really high income. This is a world in which we have managed to get money into the pockets of the few and globally coordinated such that the masses are taken care of, but really not prospering. And so that's the world of frugal feudalism. Then there's another one that I've thought about. That's technocracy's triumph, or technocrats' triumph. And this is a world in which select countries around the world have done really well and were really fast in developing responses to the virus and to the economic fallout. And those countries will be pulling ahead of the rest of the world. And there will be some countries in there that we have known about for a while, especially in Asia. And then there are some others elsewhere that are doing really well and that may in fact be pulling ahead of the rest of the economy. Who that is, we can talk about in greater detail elsewhere, but we may see some surprises there. And then there is the fourth world called Renaissance Reloaded. Renaissance Reloaded is a world in which we have coordinated, by and large. No world is ever perfect, of course. And we have also been quite successful at allocating the right funds to the right people, such that the broad, massive populations of everybody in society, really, especially workers and consumers, are adequately taken care of so that we can recrank the economy. If we get that right, we might in fact see broad innovation in the economy that spurs productivity and growth. Again, we can talk about the details of how this happens, but just think for the moment about how different these archetype futures are between the seemingly utopian future of Renaissance Reloaded, the seemingly dystopian future of medieval mess, and the two in the middle, technocrats' triumph and frugal feudalism. The role that we play here is not to pick one over the other. It's not to forecast or predict which one is more likely. That might be fun to do, to play these what-if games, but really, we have to prepare for all four, because these are archetype futures. These are bookends, as it were, and the real future as it evolves will fall somewhere in between. That's why we will look at, or we can look at, themes and phenomena. This is now the P, right, in Flip It, that are similar, if not the same, across all futures. I'm going to give you an example. So, for instance, the first one, of course, is that it will take anywhere between 18 and 24 months for us to even fully grasp what type of future might be settling in, as it were. And so that's something to be aware of. We need to bring the long view with us and have take a good deep breath, because while we may be out of quarantines and lockdowns fairly soon, the true impact on the fabric of the economy may take a while to become clear. The next one is roll-ups are unavoidable. What does roll-ups mean? Roll-ups is sort of a business term to say that there are going to be different strong and different weak players across the economy, and as it becomes evident who is no longer able to survive, the stronger players will start gobbling them up, rolling them up into even stronger entities. That is a painful but a normal process in the economy by which it heals and restarts. And so, of course, we need to keep a close eye on that from a regulatory angle, but it is probably unavoidable that we will see a fairly large amount of enterprises going under and or being acquired. Then there is the phenomenon of supply chains decentralizing. What I mean by that is that we have been overly dependent in our supply chains on certain countries in certain regions, and of course most prominently China and Asia, and that we have been very preoccupied with optimizing those supply chains, not realizing that they were fairly fragile, narrow constructs. And that was all driven by efficiencies, by scale economies. And now we are faced with an even greater fallout for these fragile supply chains, and that needs to be taken care of. So we may see a period of innovation that is not that efficient, by which we will try to create platforms that can more flexibly point us to new sources for production factors, including, of course, for labor. So what will that decentralization look like? We don't know, but it will be probably very different from the very linear constructs that we see today. Next is then work and many other products and services around the economy will start to virtualize or hybridize. We're now deeply entrenched in this area of virtualization of our communication, of our productivity, And I'm sure you are all experiencing the same kind of video conference fatigue that I'm experiencing. And yet, of course, it's a way to stay connected. It's a way to stay alive and productive. So that's not going to go away anymore. But we have to find ways to be more people-centric. People want to connect. They want to feel the real person, the real mensch, as it were. And we have to figure out how to do that. How do we hybridize these virtual solutions? Very tricky, but some entrepreneurs will no doubt come up with solutions. Next then is, of course, as we virtualize and hybridize, there'll be massive amounts of data. So we'll see a push for even more data, or shall I say a pull. And as we generate more data, we will feel the need to start to look at data differently, because we have not done a really good job at valuing data, whether that's for consumers or enterprises. And so as we think about that boost in data, it looks like we will have good incentive to think about valuing data and potentially pricing data, or once it's valued, giving it away for free, right? Think about data on the pandemic, on infections, on diseases for smart public health networks. We might decide that some of that data that's super valuable will be made available as a public good. And that will be good. Now, with the increasing amount of data and valuation of the data, we will also see a further strengthening of the, well, let's say 8 to 10 global internet platforms, such as, you know them, the usual suspects. Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft on this side of the Pacific, and then there are the 3 or 4 Chinese platforms, most prominently Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent. And there are some others, so let's expand it to maybe a dozen or so platforms that are increasingly running our world. They have been subject to regulatory scrutiny increasingly, and some public scrutiny as well, as we're trying to figure out issues like privacy and explainability and transparency. It is unlikely that we will see heavy-duty regulation over the next, I'd say, 12 to 18 months, because we all very much rely on those platforms, unless, of course, there are very significant missteps. Let's not hope that that will happen. So those platforms will gain in further power. Now, as we look at all these themes and phenomena, and of course, we could probably come up with 24 more, we have to then ask ourselves, what does this actually mean in terms of impact on us? And that can be done in 2 ways. I like to come at things from an outside-in perspective, or macro to micro, as it were. So I think we first have to take a look at societal systems, the domains that we act in as business leaders, or really as leaders anywhere. They are far larger than the term industry would allude to. Industry is usually bounded by strictly economic actors, but I think we can all agree that our economic and our social activity is, of course, much more multifaceted, and even the economy is driven by many more things than just purely technological and economic factors. So we have to take a look at our stakeholder systems in which we act, and ideally in which we responsibly act. What has happened there? Where have things broken? Where have things become more fragile? Where has the health of a system suffered? What does that mean then for how we act in the system? Can we help fix things? Do we need to let go of certain assumptions about how these systems work, certain incentive schemes, or even certain parties and actors in these systems? Lots of uncertainties there, but we can assess that impact, because in short order, that fallout, those second and third order effects of the crisis will become apparent. Next, we have to take a look at our value and activity chains. It doesn't really matter whether you are a for-profit or a not-for-profit institution. We all have activity and value chains. So who is up and who is down? Who has suffered and who has gained? Who has become more volatile? Who has gone away? Whom do we need to displace or replace or substitute for? Whom do we have to strengthen? Over whom do we have less or more leverage today as we negotiate new arrangements? Those are critical questions of impact arising from the phenomena, from the phenomena that, of course, in turn rest on the new operating logic of the future. Remember, flip it. So there are lots and lots of opportunities to both fix things and to seize new horizons. And that's where the T in flip it comes in, and that's triage. So we had a bunch of opportunity that we were going after before the crisis. Some of those opportunities are still there. Some of those opportunities are weakened, and some of those opportunities have gone away. Then concurrently, new opportunity has arisen, and that's really where the trick lies. We have to direct our gaze forward and say, okay, what does the new playing field, the new landscape yield in terms of opportunity? This is where you go back to the impact assessment. Where are things broken that need new solutions? Where do things need fixing, but where do things need substitution? Where do we maybe want to leave dysfunctional systems completely behind and create new ones, whether that's in transportation or education or healthcare or other domains in society, right? So there are new horizons to be opened up here as well. And as we look at old and new, we need to triage. We need to understand which opportunities in our portfolio do we have to let go of in the old portfolio, which opportunities in the new portfolio are not right for us, which opportunities in the old portfolio are still good, and which opportunities in the new portfolio could be fantastic for us. So we have to assess both the old and the new against each other. As we do that, we can make decisions more easily what our new portfolios look like. And so therein lies the resilience, to put our gaze forward and look at new horizons in order to assess old and new and create a new mix. So this is where Flip It finally gets you. It flips the gaze from the past, from mourning the past, which of course we all need to do, from regretting that we can no longer seize opportunities in the past, to flipping it to the future, the new stuff that will be happening. And there are bright horizons to be had. There's lots of precedent for that. And there's, of course, lots of famous quotes like, there's lots of opportunity amidst chaos, or never waste a good crisis. So lots of people have lived through crises. Arguably, this one is very, very sizable. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean opportunity horizons are not going to open up. So with that said, remember, flip it, flip your view from the past to the future and discover new opportunity, triage, and get to a new healthy and hopefully even more successful place where you can still prosper in whichever way you desire. And so I'm here to help you do that, if you like, as I'm sure all of my Haas colleagues are. And I hope that you will make us part of this journey. We're all on this journey together. It is our role, our purpose in life as educators and as capacity builders to help others grow and thrive. And this is a tremendous opportunity to do that without necessarily denying that there is a lot of pain and suffering right now. Of course, it is the hallmark of a good leader to acknowledge that first, and then give people hope. Give people hope that there is a new path. Looking at that does not mean denying the former. And so that is what I'm proposing here. And that is why I gave you those 5 steps. And again, I'm happy to help you navigate those. For now, please do stay healthy and sane. Don't forget to look us up. You can find me on the Haas website. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. Contact me if you wish. I'm happy to answer any questions electronically or otherwise. Thank you very much. Be safe and keep in touch.